Hello and welcome back to Painting with Andrew Theophilopoulos. Today we're painting headdress in oil. I use a few brushes with my setup. I've got large, small, hard, and soft. Few different types of oil paint. We've got a nice quality professional Windsor Newton, student quality, and a Gamblin. Gamblin makes a very nice linseed oil that I like to use, and Windsor Newton makes a Liquin. Today's session is actually inspired by Alphonse Mucha, and I'll show you how. Here I've uploaded the Photoshop JPEGs of my process. I've got a photo that I took somewhere in the landscape, slap on Mucha with some sort of distortion and abstraction, and slowly I mold that into a very new painting for myself. I usually project my paintings onto board, and here you can see me using a pretty crappy TV movie style projector. I picked it up on Craigslist, pretty cheap and very easy and convenient size to project your small drawings into any size. So this is actually the first time I brought oil paint directly to board rather than using a projector and tracing with pencil. Kind of skips a step and has a pretty nice quality, I'd say so. Now you may be wondering what it is exactly that I'm painting on. This brown material is something pretty cheap. You can get it at Home Depot or Lowe's perhaps. It's called Masonite. Very strong board, takes paint very nicely. You definitely would have to gesso the piece. But in this case I've used a Liquin to prime it. That was that little bottle that I showed you at the very beginning. And Liquin is meant as a medium, but I heard you can slap it down and use it as a gesso. It works pretty well with oil. This is my first time doing that, so I'm trying it out. But I think I like it. So here we go, and I'm off painting that orange headdress. And something I like to do when, let's say I've got a full orange headdress, is vary the color of each orange. The way I do that basically is by mixing a few different puddles. We got the white over on the left, maybe a little bit of orange, a little bit of purple. And the way that I can vary these is just slightly adding, let's say, a little bit of the yellow next to one with a little bit of orange. You can pick up a highlight by going back to the yellow and then drop into shadow by adding a little bit of purple. Perhaps it becomes some sort of a neutralized orange. And so just that small variation in every single feather makes them feel a little bit unique, a little bit like they're in a different sense of space. Each one kind of falls behind the other or is facing a different direction. Perhaps they're picking up some sunlight and the other ones are picking up the light of the blue sky. So there's an infinite amount of combinations, but I wouldn't exactly say that I'm following nature. I'd say I'm just definitely mixing beautiful colors. It's what I like to do. But the most important thing I'd say is the value. Every time I put down an orange stroke, the value should be, let's say, straight across the board, but as soon as it comes in contact with another item, let's say flower or maybe her hair, it's definitely going to lose some of its brightness. It's going to fall into the shadow as it reaches behind the flower. Or perhaps it's going to catch a bright light if it's totally out in the open. So just mixing up these small variations is definitely a good way to get a lot of information to look very unique. Chiseling out the figure from the background is probably one of my favorite things. I probably shouldn't do it so early just because my hand does rest into the wet paint and I tend to make a mess, but still I just can't stop myself. This value structure of the Masonite that I've been using has been so nice. This is the first time I've ever used Masonite as part of the background or perhaps the background color, and I had to say the more I painted, the further I got, the more I liked it. And I'm pretty sure at the end of the painting there's still bits and pieces of Masonite still showing through. She's wearing, let's say, a brown cloth around her neck. I think I saved quite a bit of that to still be the Masonite. It's got its own texture, its own personality, and it's always nice to have that in the mix of, a bunch of paint. So you may be wondering why exactly I brought a Mucha painting into this illustration. I would say I get most of my inspiration from the old masters. I know there's countless websites and infinite amount of modern art, the digital painting, the concept art. But for me, I've always connected with the dead guys. I don't know if their taste was better, maybe they were a little more bored and spent more time on their craft. But it was hard work for these dudes, and, well, let's just say Alphonse Mucha nailed it. But, he's long gone. The guy is dead. Something that I would find inspirational, let's say, in the next 50 to 100 years after I pass, it'd be very interesting to see what people could do while using my artwork as inspiration, or perhaps, texture, some sort of grounds to start their own artworks off of. So I may be abusing his work by slapping it into a Photoshop file, warping it, or doing whatever I did, but I feel as though Alphonse Mucha and perhaps any dead painter would die all over again just to see one of us in the 21st century bring new life into their old artwork. So before I die, I'd like to say you can have permission to do the same type of technique with my own work. Go into my website, steal anything you like, and see if you can find some inspiration. I've used the same technique where I take my own paintings on top of my new paintings and try and slap something together, distort it, maybe erase the faces or erase the important parts of one of my paintings. And just that small amount of influence will change my mind. It'll give me new eyes, fresh eyes, and I'll be able to go into a new direction based on something fancy that I put in, something that I worked a long time on at one point, and it really does help. So getting back to the painting here, this is one of my favorite brushes. It's called a Vinci brush. It's a little scratchy, but also a little soft. I believe it is mongoose hair. But it's something that usually if I'm doing large, heavy paint strokes, I'll have to knock back with the soft brush. It's got so much personality, so much texture, and I really, really love using these style of brushes, the bristly brushes. The only problem is when it comes down to photographing the painting or even looking at it on your wall, these hatches get so much glare that it's almost impossible to see what the original painting looked like, and even harder to sell in a gallery scenario. So I have to hold off sometimes. I'll use the brush to get a little bit of personality, but I have to knock it back in most cases. The way that I do that is by taking a soft, fuzzy brush and kind of making marks in the direction that works well with the lighting that you're in. I think if it works well in your studio, it's most likely going to be manageable in the gallery space and eventually on a client's wall. So this is definitely one big thing that most painters who use these types of brushes have to deal with, is just making sure the final product comes out without massive amounts of glare. This is one of the luxuries of working in Photoshop. You never have to worry about anything like that, even though sometimes we try to simulate it. But just the nature of glare and gooiness and the life on a piece of board is so much more rewarding than any Photoshop painting that I've ever made, and of course any painting that I've ever printed. No glare there. Anyway, if you want to get away from the glare, you can always buy matte mediums, but I'm pretty sure the linseed oil that I'm using makes it kind of shiny. It's a little plasticky and has a nice finish. So yeah, that's day one. Here's the JPEG that I scanned. Not bad. Definitely was missing some information, so I set up a photo shoot, which is always nice. But then I got a phone call, which is pretty cool too. Hey, Dad. But yeah, so just moving on to that. Basically, the painting is dried now, and I'm using the linseed oils to do a little bit of washing. I definitely wanted to mix some clean, super bright oranges for the feathers, so I'm going to go into that. I needed a little bit more shadow shapes, probably behind just about everything, so you see me go into those. But so far, really, it just kind of needed an extra few hours. So even though the painting dried, it had a little bit of the glare and the texturedness that I was talking about, so I did take it with the sander and knock those back. But doing that photo shoot is something that really helps. This is definitely just a doodle that I'm doing, something I came up with kind of randomly on my own. But if I were to work for, let's say, a client, we would do a photo shoot probably right away just after the thumbnail stage was accepted. And I can't express how important that really is. The thumbnail stage can be completely from your head, but it's so helpful to set up some sort of model with your goofy clothes, maybe a blanket for a cape, and just that small amount of information really helps bring life into your painting. My favorite memories are usually just goofy times where I'm setting up my friends in weird costumes and they're playing out the part, and it really is just a lot of fun. If you've got a good camera, you've got nothing to worry about. Most concept artists, or at least when I do concept art digitally, tends to not need the realism effect. But for personal art or perhaps character design where I really want to go into the personality of a character and their outfit, it always helps to use photo reference. One of the most important things that I would say is to start without reference. The photos are always so bad. I wouldn't say that I didn't really look at the photo that much after I took it, just because the lighting is kind of weird. The colors are not what I wanted. It's so different from the painting that I was making. But using it as a guideline, perhaps just having a few bits of information that you needed could be captured in a 15-minute photo shoot. I do have techniques where I will do a photo shoot as soon as I know what the project is from a client, and I'll actually use those in my rough sketches. It looks kind of nice, but for most cases, I would say the best advice I have is to come up with your idea, come up with the strangeness of your own reality, and then of course go out into the field and bring reality into it. I would say your painting should be the influential bit. The photography should just represent the vision of where you'd like your painting to go. There's going to be things that you do like, things you don't like, things you want to totally ignore. In most cases, if you don't have a super fancy camera and you don't spend several minutes editing the settings on your camera, your photography is going to be blown out. It's going to be too bright in areas and too dark in areas. And even if you know how to paint like a super fantastic master, I would never advise anyone to copy a photograph. There are a few examples of how you can be successful in copying photographs, but in most cases it's the stylized version of the things you captured in a photo. So here we are. I've got that soft brush that I was using earlier to soften things, but now I'm actually painting softly with it. I wanted to put these characters in the background. I'm actually kind of going off of the last video I made with that Birdman, maybe an Egyptian god of some sort. And that's what those two characters kind of turned out to be. At first they were just blobs. They were kind of following the original sketch that I'd made. But it's really fun to make a huge mess with your oil paint. Lots of textures will come out of it. Weird shapes will show up, and it's kind of like looking into the clouds to see what you find in them. And that's what I like to do with abstract mess that I would make. One last touch, I got the signature, and here's the final painting. Thank you everybody so much for following along. If you feel like you need more education, please check out the videos that I've already posted online. We've got a nice little sketchbook painting in oil and Photoshop painting. Please be sure to subscribe, and I can't wait until next time. Thanks everybody. Again, this was Painting with Andrew Theophilopoulos. I'll see you later.